The last 25 years of baseball here in Chicago have been anything but boring. We've had the highest of the high on both sides. 2005, Sox won the World Series. 2016, the Cubs won the World Series. So that's unbelievable. We've gone through eras of rebuilding. This past year, the Sox had one of the worst seasons in baseball history. But even through the ups and downs, standout players, unforgettable moments have kept fans talking. I believe Steve Bartman happened within the last 25 years. I think that was '03. People are still talking about that incident. So the big question on this 25-year mark of this century, who makes the cut for best Sox and Cubs teams of the past quarter century? Here to answer this burning question, Chris K. He's back, baby.
Guys.
He's back. Chris is our digital sports reporter to break some of this down, maybe stir up some debate here. There's no way you're getting through this segment without generating tons of controversy, sir. So I already feel for you.
I appreciate it. I've already gotten some of that controversy. In Chicago Sports Tonight, we unveiled the Cubs one, and immediately there was like, well, what about this guy? What about this guy? I was like, well, you know what? We've got to start somewhere.
Okay, so before we get to the lineups, all right, I want to ask you what the process was to narrow down this list and how tough was it?
It started with obviously longevity. Like, you can't just have a guy that was on the Cubs or the Sox or any Chicago team for just like 2 years, because at that point, like, that's not an all decade or all quarter century player. Like, they're not there for 25 years. Like, obviously players like Anthony Rizzo have to just be on the list, because you can't have a guy that basically helped win a World Series and was the face of a team without being on that list. Paul Konerko, another one of those players too, where you have the gimmies, if you will. And then we start there, and then you just kind of start wondering, well, who fits in around those players? And you have difficult conversations like Giovanni Soto or Wilson Contreras or Ian Happ or Alfonso Soriano. And especially in the pitching rotation too, where like there's a lot of really good pitchers, but when it comes to the amount of great pitchers, like there's maybe only a couple of them. So you have to figure out who are the good guys that are going to fit around the great ones.
Yeah, names like Kerry Wood and Mark Pryor kind of come up in my mind. Let me ask you this before we get to the list. Did you choose one player per position and have a little rotation of pitchers in a bullpen, or how did you guys narrow it down that way?
When discussion with John Shipman, sports executive producer, we decided that we're going to do just a starting rotation and then a closer. We could get in the weeds with the setup men. We can get in there with relievers, but like there have been so many of those. And those are a dime a dozen, really.
Right.
So
unless you're the New York Yankees and you have, what was his name? Mariano Rivera or something.
Yes, indeed.
And we haven't really had one of those, right? I mean, or maybe we have.
Well, if you're the White Sox, you had one in Bobby Jenks, but for the Cubs,
true.
that's the tough one. That's the big guy.
Okay, Chris, without further ado, you want to take us through these?
Yeah, so the White Sox one is actually still in development. We're finishing up that one. But when we go into the Cubs, obviously we have Wilson Contreras at catcher, Anthony Rizzo at first base. At second base, we have Nico Horner. This is a newer name that a lot of people were thinking, well, what about Addison Russell? What about Ben Zobrist? But there's a reason why we chose Nico Horner. And then shortstop, Javier Baez. You can't have a list without El Mago. Same with next to him, Chris Bryant at third base. But then you go to the outfield as well, where you have in right field, you can't have a Cubs list without Sammy Sosa. And then at center field, this one was a little bit of a debate, because it was, well, this guy's only been here for a couple of years, but he's playing at an MVP level right now, which is Pete Crow Armstrong at center field.
Yeah.
And then you go into left field, which was the debate for me. That was the biggest one. And obviously when you look at catcher, it's, well, Wilson Contreras is here, but then he went to the Cardinals. So how do you pick a guy that basically just pulled a Benedict Arnold on a fan base? But
okay, you were about to mention left field, though. Let's get to left field.
But left field was the big one, which is Ian Happ or Alfonso Soriano, because Ian Happ has been here for much longer.
Did Moises Alou enter the conversation? Didn't he play left? Alou?
He did, but statistically, Happ and Soriano were better players in the outfield. So when you kind of measure it up that way, you think, okay, well, who's going to be the guy? And to me, it came down into deliberation with some of my most trusted Cubs fans that I
Mm-hmm.
know, but also other people around in the media that have been around Cubs, the Cubs for the last 25 years. They said, well, you got to think of it this way. The Cubs didn't spend money on free agents until they signed Alfonso Soriano. They knew that once Sammy left, they needed a new face of the team. But then general manager Jim Hendry was still reluctant to be like, well, I'm not going to give big bucks to a guy that might be here for only a handful of years. So
Mm-hmm.
it came down to convincing him to spend that much money on a guy. And Soriano was the guy, and he was the face of that Cubs charge in 2007, 2008, and
Mm-hmm.
2009, going into the 2010s, where they won multiple NL Central titles. They went to the playoffs a handful of times, and he was the guy with his really high. It was, I think it was foot to knee stockings. Like it was
Oh,
very
I remember those. Yeah.
recognizable.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And he was that player. And not to say Ian Happ can't be that player, because who knows? In the next 25 years, we could revisit this again and say, hey, Ian Happ ended up being a pretty great player. Honestly, we're probably the best in left field we've seen in the last 25 years
Uh,
after that. But for me, Soriano changed the perception of what free agents consider a prize destination, which is Chicago. He changed the perception of that.
okay. Let's head to the pitching mound.
We started obviously with John Lester,
Okay. Yep.
and then you go from there to Jake Arrieta
Oh my
to
gosh. Yes.
oh
I
you
forgot. Oh man. Yeah. He didn't he have a Cy Young season or a couple of those before he left town?
he he had a stretch. I believe it was like 2025, or excuse me, not 2025, 2015, all the way to like 2016, 2017, 2018, where he was one of the best pitchers in baseball
Yeah. He was
by
like a
far.
20 game winner
It,
perennial.
yeah, and I can't remember who they traded, but yesterday was the anniversary where they traded for Jake Arrieta with the Baltimore Orioles, and someone said, "Hey, Leo, happy anniversary to those who celebrate Jake Arrieta's arrival in Chicago," and he was one of, I think, the best pitcher there. Obviously, John Lester was the big name free agent signing,
Yeah.
which you don't get without Alfonso Soriano, but then you have Arrieta and then Kyle Hendricks too, which kind of
Sure.
round out
Sure.
the modern day rotation of
Yes.
those players. Then after that, we chose Mark Pryor because if you want to look at Kerry Wood, if you
Mm-hmm.
want to look at a couple of those pitchers from the early 2000s, Mark Pryor had a better elite stretch there.
Then
And then
Kerry
you
Wood.
finish it out. And then Kerry Wood. If you look
Really?
at the
Because I just
statistics,
remember. I mean,
yeah.
I remember when Kerry Wood set the strikeout record. Justine wasn't born yet in 20. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. And by the way, she's from Michigan. So are you a Tigers fan?
I am a Tigers
Okay.
fan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
That's
I actually just went
it's
to my
allowed.
first Cubs game yesterday.
Yeah, Justine just went to Wrigley
Yeah.
Field for the first time
Woohoo!
yesterday.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she
Congratulations.
got to see PCA.
I did. I did. I saw
th-
the crowds with their signs that say PCA.
I mean, it's pretty cool that he's even in the discussion, but I mean, deservedly so based on his performance so far. I want to explore a little bit more, looking back at that 03, 04, like Mark Pryor, Kerry Wood. So Pryor made the cut over Kerry Wood here. So it's Arrieta, Hendricks, Lester, Pryor.
And then Carlos Zambrano. You can't
Oh,
forget
I
about
remember
Bigsby.
him. Yeah, that's right.
Oh yeah.
This
Oh yes. But
guy, Justine, was a hard throwing dude. Yeah, I
oh
remember he had some emotional issues, if memory serves, but he was
I think
strong.
he leads. Yeah, I think he leads all Cubs pitchers in Gatorade containers smashed with a bat. And
That's right.
you can't. You have to put that into context too, especially if you're going to remember the Big Z, because he was emotional. But like,
Yes.
man, was he good?
Right. I think
We
that's
forgot how good he was.
well done on the list. Well done. I think. Okay. How about, did you guys do manager or no?
That comes later in the summer.
Okay. All right. So, where are you in the process of narrowing down the White Sox here?
Right now, at White Sox, we're stuck on second base. That's the one. That's the one spot we're kind of struggling with a little bit because when you look back at the last 25 years, the White Sox, they really haven't had that many second basemen that have like it really stood out.
Mm.
Obviously, Ray Durham in the beginning of the 2000s was a guy that had over 10 wins above a replacement, which is a big statistic that you look at.
Hmm.
But but when he was only here for a couple of years in the 2000s, I think And we started this exercise in 2001 because technically, if you're going to do 25 years, it's 2001
right,
all the way
right,
to
right, right.
2025. And Ray was here for beginning of the 2000s and then was traded to I believe the Milwaukee Brewers. But I think at that point you start to look at and say, well, how can you include a guy that was here for just a year or two? And
Yeah.
it's tough because other players like Tejada Iguchi was one of the final pieces of that 2005 World Series team where he led off games where he would get on base and then someone like Aaron Rowland would drive him home. That was the whole point of him leading off. And as a defensive second baseman too, he's fantastic. But right now, that's where we're held up on, just trying
Okay.
to kind of comb through the weeds, making sure we're not leaving a stone unturned. But we had some difficult decisions there too,
Okay.
like Alexi
When are you guys
Ramirez or
unveiling the Sox lineup?
that to be Sunday morning.
Okay. Before we let you go, because we're getting short on time, Chris, is what was the biggest piece of pushback you've gotten so far about the Cubs lineup?
Oh, it was not the inclusion of Ben Zobrist, which
Okay.
was
Yeah, because
really
he was like the
difficult.
World Series hero, if memory serves.
He was the World Series hero. Got that double that scored the go-ahead run, even though Miguel Montero had technically the game-winning run. But if you look at that specific inclusion, it was going up against Aramis Ramirez,
Oh
and
yeah.
Aramis Ramirez was for the better part of a decade a fixture with the Cubs lineup, and
Oh
it was
yeah.
tough to include Zobrist, who was here for the better part of just about 3 or 4 years, over a guy that. But if put in the same position in the World Series, it's hard to argue that the outcome wouldn't have been the same.
Okay, Chris K. Thank you, sir. Good luck getting through this. I mean, you guys are going to have to do a lot of mental gymnastics to get this lineup unveiled by Sunday. But I'm glad you're doing it, and I think you guys really made solid contact with the ball for the Cubs, man. So congrats. Good
Thanks,
stuff.
Chris.
I like the pun. Appreciate it, guys.
All right, Chris K. Sorry, Justine. We were going. I mean, literally inside
sports
baseball
talk,
there.
I'm just like, okay. It just sounds like numbers and letters to me, and I'm like, okay.
Well, tell me about your impressions of Wrigley Field.
I loved the food. I was there for the snacks, a nice little drink, and
Did you sit in the bleachers or did you sit?
So
in the
actually, I had
stands?
the Catalina Club tickets,
yeah.
right?
Ooh,
so
fancy,
I won
fancy.
them. I won them from the sales team.
Oh, that's oh my
right.
gosh.
So I got to really experience it the best way.
Oh
it was
my gosh.
such a great
yeah.
time.
Well, you know what? You're gonna have to even that out at some point and
Uh-huh.
sit, out in the bleachers, get crazy, get crazy
I
out
plan on
there.
it.
The Catalina Club. I mean, you can get crazy there too, but it's very upscale.
It is. It
It's very
is.
upscale,
Right. I
yes,
had some
indeed.
good food.